April 30th, 2017, I was sworn in as the first Black woman to hold the position of student government president. The following day, after returning from a sorority conference where I had just received a leadership award, I was the victim of a hate crime. When I was getting on the metro, on my way up, I had received a text message from one of my friends, actually one of my friends who I had attended a social justice retreat with. Sending me a picture of bananas hung from nooses outside of a bus stop on our campus, lettered with AKA, AKA free, and Harambe bait. I received an email from the Anti-Defamation League notifying me of cyber harassment by known neo-Nazis on a known neo-Nazi social media website. That moment on May the 4th was the first day that it clicked. In those moments, I locked my doors, closed my windows, went into my hallway, turned all my lights off, locked myself in, literally, and like crouched down into fetal position because I was terrified. My mom couldn't understand me when I called her on the phone sobbing. I was I couldn't talk. So all I did was send my parents a screenshot of the email that I got, and then immediately family, friends that were in the area, my best friends, people from the university police, were at my apartment in less than 15 minutes, which was really, really amazing. But in the time that has followed, in the past 6 months and 13 days, 12 days actually, I have been fortunate enough to speak out against racism, bigotry, and hate crimes that have been happening across the country, but specifically on college campuses. I've had the opportunity to testify before Congress and submit written statements. I've participated in a number of conferences and being a part of a lot of different forums to really talk about my story and what that meant to me. In the aftermath, I had a triggering of my eating disorder or disordered eating. I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of this trauma. So there was one trauma being the initial hate crime, and the second trauma was the cyber harassment by neo-Nazis. Later on, a couple of months later in the summer, you have Charlottesville. And being a Black student with friends that go to UVA, that was chilling. I remember waking up and seeing my phone blowing up and not knowing what was going on because I was trying to separate myself from the media. And in seeing that, I was immediately re-triggered. And again, a couple months later, after speaking at our commencement or convocation for our incoming students and delivering a speech letting students know that this is not acceptable here. Any form of racism, sexism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, any form of hate is not welcomed on our campus. There were Confederate flags and cotton bushels hung up on campus on the first night of the opening of our AU Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center. These posters were hung around 10 different places on campus, but were also hung on the Israeli Studies bulletin board. So to say that didn't compile me within two parts of my identity as a Black woman, but also someone who has been targeted by neo-Nazis, that put me right smack in the middle of dealing with issues that have been impacting the Black students on campus and issues that have been impacting the Jewish students on campus. I too understand your very real fear of the rise and the resurgence of the neo-Nazi movement, but I also understand what Black students are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, because not every Jewish student, not every Jewish person wears their identity on their skin. Black students do, however. So being able to balance that and saying, look, this is what white supremacists seek to do. They seek to pit us against each other and try and play the oppression Olympics. That's not gonna work.
22 years ago, I left the American white supremacist skinhead movement that essentially I helped build from almost the very beginning. I was 22 years old when I left, but I was recruited 8 years before when I was 14 years old in 1987. The man who recruited me was America's first neo-Nazi skinhead leader. And then once I felt accepted, once I had this identity and this community and this purpose that I had been chasing for 14 years and was unable to find, that's when it switched, because I had abandoned everything else in my life that was important to me. And that's when the rhetoric ramped up. And the way that I found my way out was by eventually receiving compassion from the people I least deserved it from when I least deserved it. When I was at my peak at 19 years old, I had a child, and that also started to push out the hate because it challenged my sense of who I was, what my community was, and what my purpose was. Was I this, hate monger? violent thug, or was I a father and a husband? Was my community the one that I had manufactured around me to boost my own ego and to make me feel powerful when I felt powerless, or was it the one that I had physically given life to? I left the movement in 1995 and struggled for many years afterwards because I tried to outrun who I was. For 5 years, I was in a very deep depression where I woke up some mornings wishing I hadn't, because I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know where I belonged. And even though I was treating people with respect and I was inclusive and I had friends of all types, I was holding a cancer inside of me that I didn't even know why it was making me feel miserable. And then one day, a friend came to me and she said, "I don't want to see you die. Go apply for a job where I work at IBM." And of all places, literally, millions and millions of customers that IBM has, where did they put me to install the computers? Back in my old high school, the same one I got kicked out of twice. It was there where I met the man, Mr. Johnny Holmes, who was the tough black security guard who I'd gotten in a fist fight with at that school, that got me kicked out for the second time, that I was let out in handcuffs in. I saw him, and I didn't know what to do, but I decided I needed to suffer under the weight of my past. And I ran after him once I saw him pass me in the hallway on my first day of work. And he forgave me for tormenting him for many, many years. And he encouraged me to forgive myself. And he also made me promise that I would tell my story to anybody who would listen. When I work with people who are part of hate groups or extremists, I don't argue with them. I don't debate them. I don't tell them that they're wrong. I want to. Trust me, I do. I hear things that are very ugly, things that used to come out of my mouth. But instead I listen, and what I listen for are what I call potholes. Those things that appeared in their life that put them off track. It could be trauma, could be unresolved or untreated mental health condition, could be unemployment, could be marginalization, could be a whole sort of thing. For me it was abandonment and low self-esteem. And if we're not careful and we don't help people navigate around those potholes, sometimes they find their place in really dark corridors and they can get dangerously lost. Like I was, is I will put them in contact with people that they claim that they hate. I've spent hours with Holocaust deniers and Holocaust survivors, Islamophobes and Muslim families, homophobes and LGBTQ communities, and it's amazing that once they go in there and they are able to connect with these people that they've never met before but hate, how interesting their perspective changes.
So, last December, our community was attacked by cyber terrorists. The beginning of this story had one factual encounter. Richard Spencer's mother approached a Jewish realtor in town, Tanya Gersh. She wanted to talk with Tanya about selling her building. That little kernel of truth evolved into an anti-Semitic hateful narrative that Andrew Anglin launched on the Daily Stormer, attacking Tanya, attacking myself, and attacking another woman in town, saying that the Jews were taking over Whitefish. That first article in the Daily Stormer started 6 weeks of harassment and terrorism by phone calls, text messages, Facebook messages, a whole host of memes and graphics created about us using our pictures. Our town also had a rally, Love Not Hate rally, where we celebrated the cultural diversity of our area, and I was able to speak up and speak publicly against hatred, against anti-Semitism, and in support of people taking that step of standing up and speaking out for each other. And people often hear my story and they will say to me, and it's often Jewish people from the East, "Oh yeah, well, that's Montana. Of course it happened there." And I try to make the point that the people who attacked us were from all over the country, actually not from Whitefish. I just lift up those models of the people in power speaking out, because we had to go dark. A, we were terrified, And B, the more if we spoke to the press, that just made us more of a target. So we had to go dark, but everyone around us, and thankfully the people in high places, spoke up in our defense. You know, as the one who was being attacked and the leader of the community, it was incredibly challenging to put out a message, and yet it wasn't so challenging at all because it was Hanukkah, and I could just encourage my community to do what our ancestors had done from generation to generation, bring light into the darkness, and not let our tradition fail.
Love it.